Public School Board will vote on the final budget tomorrow as the school district faces a $65 million shortfall. Well, now in a time when everything is on the chopping block, education advocates are pushing to make sure the needs of students of color are a priority in the fall. Good evening, I'm Kathy Walsh. Thank you for joining us. Today, a coalition of organizations called on the Denver Board of Education to make sure underserved students aren't forgotten when the final budget vote comes. CBS 4's Mackenzie O'Keefe listened to a virtual press conference today. And Mackenzie, these groups want to make sure programs important to the Black community aren't cut.
That's right, Kathy. It was students, it was parents, it was these advocates for education who made a plea to the Board of Education today. They say that when that budget comes out, they want to make sure that they're prioritizing all students, regardless of race or financial background, and making sure all students have the resources they need to succeed.
This is a moment that we have to do differently.
A message of equality in tough times.
I would really love to encourage the board to prioritize increased social, emotional, and academic needs for our students as they come to terms with the trauma of the last 4 months, both racial trauma and the trauma of COVID-19.
Because of COVID-19, DPS is facing a $65 million shortfall. Education advocacy groups are asking DPS to pay attention to inequities for students of color, students with special needs, and students in low-income housing when making budget decisions.
As the board who's supposed to serve each individual in Denver Public Schools, you cannot also disregard our needs. Recognize our voices, acknowledge our pains.
The group is asking DPS to think about prioritizing students' access to mental health and access to remote learning, and if making cuts to staff, to look at the student populations.
Don't cut the educators of color, knowing the demographics of our district, knowing the research about students who have educators who look like them.
While the budget hasn't yet been finalized, DPS released a statement saying in part, quote, "The members of our Budget Advisory Committee worked through solutions that kept equity at the forefront and avoided cuts to schools."
Now, also in that statement, DPS said that they had 3 major focus points. The first was health and safety for students. The second was social emotional support, especially for those students that are most vulnerable. And the third was making sure that they could help those students who fell behind in remote learning, especially those in the underserved communities. Now, that vote will take place tomorrow. We're live here in Denver. Mackenzie O'Keefe covering Colorado First.
Thank you, Mackenzie. And we are bringing